Today is Wednesday, 15th of April 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. And let me pull the model today because we are going to go straight into the topic. So this is a full model of the advisory board operating systems, and today we are going to focus on the controls and resilience. So all the things that are related to performance, governance, risk, compliance, and assets. Now, I'm going to focus in certain things, particularly in technology, because I think it's a good example on a good, easy topic to understand in terms of how resilience operates in all these things, right? So from the asset lens, today is about all the system assets, so the governance, governance risk and compliance assets and the performance assets. So this is also where many boards, executive teams, and founders get caught, right? Why? They think resilience is a technical issue, right? But IT will handle it, or compliance will handle it, or risk will track it. But when the incident lands and the boards or executive teams and the founders discover the real issue was never technical. It was a leadership visibility. It was a control maturity. It was whether the company knew which services had to keep running, which third parties could fail, and how fast the business could recover. So when you think that this is somebody else's department, just be careful, particularly when you're in a non-executive director position, the board, or an executive team, or you as a founder. So if you're going to say this is somebody else's responsibility, make sure to map out this exactly. What is this somebody? Who is this somebody else? What are the responsibilities, the control mechanisms, the risk, and the mapping, etc., etc. So we're going to cover all this today. Now, that's what I do. Practically, I've built international advisory boards with the rotating teams around the milestones in front of your company. So this is not static advisory boards. The biggest challenges that companies have today is a static teams, meaning the same non-executive directors, the same executive team, the same founder for many, many, many years. This is a problem that is easily solved without replacing people because they have the value in the organization that they brought the organization to today's standpoint, right? Now, the value is that with a rotating international advisory board, and this is something actually came from the study done by the Bank of Canada, they have 25 or 24% more revenue increase having an advisory board because they have a cognitive diversity in the executive team, the non-executives, or with the founders. So you start to see things and develop things that probably were in your mind, were in your task lists at the bottom of your priority because the next fires was more important than actually going into the next stage of the things where the company should go. And tomorrow we're going to talk about relevance. How relevant is your company today for the next, just for this year, let's put it that way, how fast things are changing, and for the next 2 or 3 years. So what you need is a specialist capability that change in a fraction of the time that takes to hire an executive without the big consulting overhead, without the talent locking, and with the option to swap members every 6 months or a year when the project evolves, right? So then you don't jeopardize your teams, though you have the capacity to go far and beyond with a more flexible setup. Now, let's take a look at 3 problems that actually you will start to look in terms of resilience, governance, risk, compliance, and your performances. The problem number 1 is that resilience is now a testable rather than theoretical. Why? Because resilience has been treated as a theory all the time, right? Like, oh, we are a resilient company, but how you test it right now to make sure that you are in that track. So the Financial Council Authority in the UK says that by March last year, firms in scope had to complete a mapping and testing to remain within impact tolerances for each important business service. And so if the boards or executive teams and founders cannot pinpoint that to evidence, the gap is no longer abstract, right? So what I'm saying with all this, the problem is actually you cannot run resilience in a theoretical environment anymore. You have to have a mapping and a testing, right? And then produce the evidence that you are really a company that understand what you're doing, where you're going, and which are the risks and which are the treatment for those risks as you go along. And you say, well, I'm not a listed company. I'm not in a public company, so I'm not that big enough to have all these challenges in front of me, and because it will take time, it will I'm too busy, etc., etc. So the problem is not that. The problem is that knowing that, how you're going to address it, right? And I understand actually companies are difficult because you have to run it just to make sure that you have enough cash flow, etc., etc. But an international advisory board looking from outside can start to see this gap much easier and kind of say, well, don't worry about all these things because while you justify why you don't address them, at least put a mechanism of control here and here that actually will help your company to be more stronger and go forward. The second problem is that that the threat level is higher than many boards, executive teams, and founders suggest, right? And this is coming from the National Cybersecurity Center, which says that in the last 12 months, up to August last year, there were 204 national significant cyber attacks and 89 on the previous year, comparing 2024. So from 90 to 204, you see the massive gap. So that is around 4 incidents a week. And you say, what cyber attack have to do with me? Has a lot to do with you, because actually I mentioned this last week already. For example, in Spain in Q1, one of the biggest, I think it's the third in the country, energy providers was attacked. And literally all the IBAN accounts, the email addresses, the passwords, the profiles of the customers, etc., 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 were stolen. So people say, well, it have nothing to do with me. I'm an independent company. I'm an independent contractor. I'm a household owner. I have nothing to do with me. Have everything to do with you now. So you see, so particularly if you are an organization, and we are going to see how this is affecting everybody, because now it's not just about they stole your data and that they can scam you. You see your phone is burning in terms of the calls that are very strange calls, or your emails are already overpopulated with very interesting offers and wings and treasury experts that are reaching out to you to give you millions, etc., etc. So where do you think that's coming from? Where they get your email address, how they know your phone number, is coming from these cyber attacks. So, and imagine the companies, how exposed they are when they have all these things. Perhaps nothing is happening today, but you never know, so you have to be careful. And the third problem is the control failures are expensive and public. And this is back to the example I provide to you. And for example, the commissioner office fined advanced computer software £3 million for security failures that put personal data of 79,000 people at risk. Yeah, and also the post office limited was fined because with the problem that disclosed personal data of 500 claimants in a settlement, right? These are not edge cases. I say these are just examples, and you take these as just examples. Say how you have your security measurements around you in the right place, right? So when you have a company and you say, well, that's not my problem, it's IT problem. Well, probably, guess what? The ultimate responsible, according to the regulator, is the director, the MD, or the shareholders, or you as a non-executive director. So you have these responsibilities, and it's going to fall into you at one point, right? So make sure that you have all these processes in place. So, and why you need all these processes in place? Because imagine resilience is the fire door in your business building, in the building of your in your building. So you don't inspect that when the building is calm because nothing happens, so we're going to test it. This is a longer view on why you're testing this. You inspect it because one day, if something happens, people will need to use that door and have to be operational and working so that people are safe, right? So this is something similar. So you're testing the things that you are doing just to make sure that actually when you need them, when the triggers, the problems, you have the mechanisms and the whole and what is called the triage. So the who is going to be called when and why at which stage as the problem escalates or de-escalates, right? So if the boards, executive teams, or founders accept that resilience is operational proof, not just a policy, what needs to change first, right? So you say, okay, now we have an operational proof that we need to put it together with evidence. So what we need to change first? So here's where I come as a board advisor. I suggest three things. The first thing is define the important business services that matter most to customers, the regulators, and cash flow, right? So don't forget about cash flow, because these are the things that actually keep the company operating. Also have to satisfy the regulators, because you don't want to notice a fine or an inspection, or if it comes, you are ready for that. And obviously your customers, because that's the purpose of the services that or products you're doing. So not every process is equal. So the boards, executive teams, and founders need clarity on what absolutely must stay running, and then the rest it could be a secondary. But you have to justify why these things are not addressed as a primary issue, right? Because when something happened and you say why we didn't address this, at least you understand what was the thinking process there, and then you can amend that in future runnings of these assessments. The second thing I would suggest is test the weak joints. So don't test the things that are already working. You have the time to do that another time, but test the things that today are not really working. So what are the third parties? Identity control, recovery time, data handling, escalation routes. So there are studies that are done by the Prudential Regulatory Authority and the Financial Council Authority on cyber response and recovery that makes the points very clearly. Response and recovery capability is now a central part of resilience, not an afterthought, right? And I say resilience because remember, we are using cybersecurity today as an example of resilience, but resilience does spread around the whole organization, where I'm using these examples because it's very easy to relate to. Now, the third thing to consider is that move resilience out of the specialist silo and into your board, not executive, or executive teams and founders rhythm, right? As I mentioned earlier, this is something that you have to look into and you have to be aware what's going on. It's not just aware on the paper and say, oh yeah, we checked that. Say, hold on a second, show me the evidence that the things are as described here in these papers, for example, these policies. So where is the evidence of the test? Where is the evidence of the chain of or the cadence of evidence? Or where are the change of the triage, meaning who is responsible for what, when? Where is the protocol for calling, etc.? And this is an interesting study from KPMG that says UK CEOs are prioritizing regulatory compliance and reporting, so as well as cyber and digital risk resilience. And that is 80% expected the cybersecurity to affect prosperity over the next 3 years. That's why they are doing it, because you look what happened with technology today, right? Technology today is evolving in a way that actually last year, ChatGPT was the thing in terms of prompting. But look what is going on today is all the conversations all of a sudden are moving into cloud. So what happened with ChatGPT? So what all the money that you put there, all the investment, the prompting, the agents, whatever you call it, your projects, now is moving into cloud. Why is this change happening, right? So you have to be up to date with the things that are going on. So that's why you need to, as a board, as an executive team, as a founder, you need to be aware of these things. It doesn't mean that you have to do them, but actually assign to the right people and then get the evidence that the protocols are there. So what is the next challenge, you may say? Well, build that capability quickly and quickly enough without waiting for the next incident to force the lesson, right? So that's why I come into play here as an advisor. And it's not just to give you ideas of things that you already know. I have very specific business outcome differentiators and risk reduction for your company, right? So in terms of business outcomes, I help your boards or executive teams or you as a founder turn controls and resilience into a working operating layer, right? So the company is easier to finance, which is very important, easier to trust, and harder to disrupt. So you want all these things. And as I mentioned, the Bank of Canada report in terms of SMEs advisory boards, they already did a study and showed that actually 25% increase in revenue for companies that actually have advisory boards. In terms of differentiator, I assembled a rotating international advisory board focused on the exact resilient gaps facing the company, drawing the right expertise across governance, controls, cyber, operational design, and recovery planning. And the reason why is because you want the experts to watch your company, assess what's going on, provide suggestions, and once the project is completed, change the members to the next milestone of the company. You have your own teams already operating the things. You don't want an advisory team that actually is very, very skilled and expert in certain things, and then 6 months later say, well, we have an advisory team, but actually their function is gone because now we are repeating the same process again and again and spinning our wheels. So my function is to make sure that actually the experts that your company needs in this model that we have in front of the screen are the right ones for the issues that have to be addressed to make sure that the company are more resilient in the coming future. And in terms of reducing the risk, members can be swapped, as I mentioned, every 6 months. So the board gets the right specialist capability and the risk profile changes without being stuck with a static structure that no longer fits the organization. Excellent. One action you can take home today, and it's doable in 30 minutes or less, before the next meeting, request a one-page resilience map that shows top 5 business services, top 3 third-party dependencies, the maximum downtime tolerance that you have, and last time that have been tested. Let me repeat that again. It's a one-pager, but you will have the resilience map. And this is for the top 5 business services, the top 3 party dependencies that are related to these business services, the maximum downtime tolerance that you can accept for these, and the last time that these have been tested. So that way you will start to understand and say, okay, in these particular areas, this is the risk that we have, this is the evidence that we need to collect, this is a triage that we need to put in place, meaning actually who is responsible for what, when, and why, and in which sequence, right? Okay. Let's pause it here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow I will go further with transformation and reinvention, because a company that only protects what already has it, what it already has today will still fall behind. And the reason why, so if you are protecting too much what you have today, you will fall behind in the future, because at the end it's all about relevance today. What is relevant to your suppliers, to your customers in terms of your services and products, and what will be relevant by the end of the year, what will be relevant in the coming years, etc., right? So have a great day, and I'll talk